and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. We're your hosts, Harold and Rachel. How you doing, Rachel?
I'm doing pretty good, other than being busy.
Busy. It's that time of year. It's always that time of year. I feel like, I used to talk about how spring was busy because of planting and then fall was busy because of harvesting. Now I just kind of feel busy a lot of the time. I don't know why.
Yeah. I felt busy a lot of the time anyways, and then you add building a house.
Just life stuff, man. It's not always just homestead stuff. It's just life stuff keeps you busy. Like my grandson's playing baseball right now, so we're going to his games. It's just things like that take all your time, but it's good busy.
Those are good busy though. That's what life is made of right there.
We're running around to a lot of ball games and watching kids, and we went out the campground a few times and hung out there, and it's just plus you got the house stuff you're just doing around the house, and we're getting ready to start a kitchen remodel, so things.
Kitchen remodel.
Yeah, not major. We're putting in some flooring in there, and we're gonna put in a couple more cabinets, but still
nice.
Something more stuff to do.
Yeah.
But how's things going on the homestead?
Pretty good. We just got the perk test back for our property. So for those that don't know what a perk test is, that's where they drill a hole down into your soil to see if your soil will do well with a typical septic system. So ours did well. We got lots of sand, which is exactly what you want for your septic if you're going to be on your own septic. So woohoo, we move forward. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. So they're getting ready to start digging on all that then? And
we're still waiting for permits, which
okay.
Apparently can take a little bit right now. They're pretty far behind. So I don't know.
Okay. Do the companies that are doing that, they take care of all that stuff, or do you guys have to actually go get the permits up there?
They're actually, so the excavation company, I think, is who files the permit for that.
Okay.
We just had to file. Actually, I still have to do it. I have to go to the the county, and file easement for the power company. So my husband and I have to go do that since both of our names are on the property deed.
Okay.
So there's some things we are doing, and some things the builder's doing, and some things the other people are doing, subcontractors. So, yep.
Nice.
And then on top of that, we rented a storage unit, and we've started packing things.
Oh, you're gonna start putting stuff in storage, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because in the winter, it's not fun to move up here. So we figured if we could get as much done as possible.
Yeah.
It'd be great.
Well, how's the garden coming along?
I am about to have a bumper crop of strawberries. We've had the perfect garden weather up here. So it's been raining every, at least once a week, maybe twice, but not too much. We haven't had the storms, thankfully, like a lot of you folks down south have. It's been pretty rough.
We didn't get any damage from them, though, in our house anyway.
So we've just had perfect rain and temperatures. So the strawberries are there's so many of them. So I guess I'm going to be freezing strawberries soon.
Yeah. We got quite a few, too. I think it was kind of a transition year for strawberries, because I basically took out a bunch of them and moved them to another bed, and I kind of thinned out the beds half and half. So I think it was a healthy move so they can spread more, but I also think it kind of hurt my crop a little bit, because they're not going to produce like a lot of them. It's going to be like first year production because I moved them. But I mean, we're definitely going to get a bunch, but not, maybe we got more last year, probably what we're going to get this year.
Okay. Yeah. And I have, and then I've been air layering a bunch of trees and bushes because I don't know if you guys have been to the store lately, but the price of plants is crazy. So I'm air layering a bunch of bushes and trees to take with us.
Yeah.
And air layering is, I don't know if I can describe this over the podcast, but basically what you do is you take off the outside bark of a tree where it's like the new growth, like a year old. It's still bendy and everything. You take out that outside growth and you go to the Camden. I can't remember if that's the right word, and you'll put like growth hormone on that, rooting hormone on that. And then you'll either take a cup, or they actually sell these little capsules that you can put in there, and you put a little cocoa coir in there that's damp, tape it all up, let it sit for like 6 or 8 weeks, and it will create roots. And you cut that off and you plant it. And so I'm trying that with some lilacs, which we did also take some cuttings, or not cuttings. I don't know, growth. They spread out from below. So we've dug up some of those, but we're doing that. And then we're doing it with our old apple tree, which I know won't be the same as if we had it on rootstock, but we're still going to do it just for a bunch of deer trees in the back 20. The apple tree we're doing this with is our old apple tree out back that it does not make great tasting apples, but it's our apple cider tree. I make apple cider vinegar from it. That tree produces every year, no matter what, a huge crop. So we thought it would be perfect for like deer and apple cider vinegar trees. And we just plant those. So even if I don't have the proper root stock on it, we don't really care. So
awesome. Well, you got a lot going on there. Sounds like even though you reduced the size of the garden and did the things you did, you still got plenty to do.
Yes, always. And that's why I did, because I knew it would be a big year having to move plants and everything. So
I'm sure in a couple years you'll be 10 times bigger than you ever were before.
Yeah, something's gonna have to give at that point.
Well, it's been just things have been growing great in the garden here. My cherry tree finally hit its peak because, like in the past, it's like we get some cherries and it would do okay, but it would never. I mean, this year loaded. I mean, so many cherries is unbelievable. But
what kind of cherries is it?
I don't know. They're a sour cherry.
Okay,
that's all I can remember. They're not one of the sweet cherries. So they're really good for pies and things like that.
Nice.
But one thing I figured out is like I picked a bunch and we got out there a couple times and picked a bunch, but there's so many. I was just kind of spacing it out over a few days. What I figured out, there's about a 4 or 5 day window on the perfect ripeness of these cherries because they started going bad really fast. Like they started going in like 1 out of 5 would be good after about 5 days. They were starting to get bad spots and go bad really fast. And I was kind of amazed by that. I mean, because we've had some in the past, and I don't remember it being that critical on getting them picked that fast. But it was like between peak picking and going bad was about a 5 day window.
Wow. So that's not a lot.
So a lot went to waste, really. I mean, I think a lot of them would still be good for like making wine or something. Like if I wanted to make some kind of a cherry wine or something out of, something like that. But there's still a lot on the tree that are just not that good now. They got a lot of issues. So
you need a little piggy.
Yeah. Well, birds have been tearing. Yeah. The birds have been cleaning out the garbage pretty good off of it. So I've seen a lot of birds in that tree. But that tree's pretty big. That's the oldest tree on my property. That was the very first tree I planted when I started planting trees with that tree. So I think it's probably 10, 12 years old now. And it really just now hit its peak. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It started producing. It didn't start producing until about 7 years old. Yeah.
That's why they have that saying where the best time to plant a tree was yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they just take a long time.
Yeah. That one, especially, that one's taken a long time to really get any kind of production out of it to any meaningful level. But we're also getting some berries. The service berries have been blowing up. I've been eating a bunch of those. Those things they're okay. They're just kind of bland tasting. They don't have a ton of flavor. But they're really productive though. There's lots of
those are the ones that are like similar to blueberries, right?
Somewhat. They're red. I mean, they're a tree, I think, more than a bush. I mean, these are pretty good. These ones, I mean, they definitely grew 3-4 feet tall since I planted them. Taller than when I planted them. But yeah, they're producing really good. They're ripe as can be. The raspberries are just now starting to turn ripe. I've seen a few of them are just starting to get to eating stage almost, but they're loaded too. So we're going to have a lot of raspberries. It looks like. Been eating lots of radishes. Rabbits I think today, maybe tomorrow they're kind of get closer to due date. So here over the weekend, I might have some baby rabbits this weekend.
Aw, baby rabbits.
Yeah, they're due. I think this would be like the first day, the earliest they could be due. So usually they come in the middle of that. So a couple of days, I think is actually the official due date. And garlic scapes, man, been picking lots of garlic scapes.
I saw that you had beautiful garlic scapes.
Yeah, I got
mine are not ready yet. Plus, I plant the elephant quote unquote garlic, so I don't get.
Yeah, well, I planted some of that I got from you as well, but then all the hardneck.
Yeah, my hardnecks. Of course, we're behind a few weeks up here.
Yeah, right. And yeah, I hadn't even looked. And I seen somebody posted some online. I thought, man, I better go check. So I went out there and it was like, they were all perfect. They were just curled up just right where they're supposed to be. So I just started grabbing them. And you want to do that. And we've done a podcast on garlic. If you want to hear that, go back and listen to it. But you want to get that because it actually helps the development of the bulb. if
Yeah.
you get those garlic scapes popped off there. Even
Right.
if you're
Yeah.
not going to eat them, get them off of there because,
Right,
um,
because what happens is the garlic is putting out a flower and it will put
mhm.
energy into the flower or into the bulb, and you want it to go into the bulb.
Yes. So yeah, I want to get all those picked, but yeah, I got a bunch. So, and I've always done a little bit of stuff with them. I mean, I'll use them for cooking. They're great. They're very good garlic flavor. I mean, they're a gift. They really are an early gift from your garlic, no doubt. But I always kind of struggle on how to use them all because I got so many. And I've done pesto with them in the past, but to me, it's a pretty strong pesto
It is
because it's
pretty
got a
strong.
really
Yeah.
strong garlic taste. So it's really a strong pesto. So it's not my favorite pesto. Basil to me is a lot better of a pesto. But so and just chop them up, put them in some eggs or just some dishes, just
Right.
sprinkle them
Yeah.
in. They're great for that. Um, you can dry them and use them in some powder. Grind them up, use them in some powder, and I've used them like that. But
Garlic
I was like, what
oil.
what other ways can we use them? Garlic oil, that's a good one. See, I didn't even have that one on the list, but I kind of threw it out there on Facebook and Instagram. I was like, well, how are you guys using these? And so I thought we'd just read a couple of those things, what folks were saying. This Donna said just roasted. I've never eaten just roasted. Have you ever just roasted them? I've
No,
never
but
done
they
that.
probably would be really good.
Yeah, I mean, I might try that. Joshua says I fermented mine in a batch of sauerkraut last year, and it was amazing.
Now that
So,
sounds
yeah,
amazing.
chop it up, put it in with some sauerkraut, and just
Yum.
mix it in and ferment it. Oh man, that sounds delicious, doesn't it? Give that sauerkraut a really nice
Makes me want
taste.
to, it makes me wish my cabbage was ready, but it's
Yeah.
actually I'm not growing it this year, which is killing me, but I'm not.
Lynn says we grind them up, add a little salt, and make garlic butter. Roll it up
Mm,
into a log shape or wrap it in plastic, and they freeze it. And it's easy to cut when you want some, and have you a roll of
yummy.
garlic butter. Yeah, that
You're
sounds
making
really
me
good too.
hungry.
Yeah, no kidding. I thought that was a pretty, those were pretty good ways. Then on Instagram, a couple folks mentioned a couple things they like to do with it as well. And let's see here. Uh, yeah, we got I pickled them last year or this year. So he's pickling them. So that would be a good, I mean, I think a lot of
Yeah,
people do
yummy.
that and that'd
That
make a
sounds
really
good.
good pickled. Yeah. And this person put last year we made onion rings and they were delicious. They kind of wrap them in a loop, kind of wrap them up in a
Yeah,
circle,
they
batter
kind
them,
of do that
fry them,
themselves
make an
too.
onion
Yeah.
ring. So I think I tried that one year and they were okay. I think I preferred onion rings rather than the garlic. I did try it. I remember trying that a couple of years ago. Somebody suggested that a couple of years ago, and I made up a small batch and tried them, and I was like, they're all right. But if you really like the garlic taste, I like
Strong garlic.
garlic,
Yeah.
but there is a limit. Now I wonder now what I've made just fermented crushed garlic before. You've done that. I think I got that idea
Mhm.
from you a few
Yeah.
years ago. I wonder if you could just do that with the scapes as well.
I
Just
don't see why
chop
not.
them up,
Yeah.
ferment it, and just make like a crushed garlic.
Yeah.
And
I
I
think you
think that
can
would be,
ferment just about
yeah.
anything,
I just
especially
wonder if it would have
plants.
I bet it would have a
Yeah.
really good. It might even be a little more mild
It
than
might be.
regular
It might
garlic
be.
being crushed up like that, than the cloves being crushed up. But anyway, I thought I'd throw it out there because you get a bunch of those. I mean, if you're growing a bunch of garlic,
Yeah.
you're gonna get escape from every one of them hard neck garlics, and it's good food. It's something that you can put to use on your homestead, and it's some good quality food. And I was out there just munching on one, which is a little strong. I was out there picking them. I'm just like munching
Oh
on
yeah.
one like it's an onion or something, and it was like, whoo. And afterwards, I was like, yeah, that's pretty strong. But
It'll open up your sinuses.
it was pretty intense. But yeah, good stuff. I mean, I love the garlic scape. It's kind of like that. It's one of them early things you get that's just really nice to get from the garden. And like radish. I do a lot of stuff with the radishes. We're making like hash brown with it and
Yummy.
all kinds of stuff with the
I
radishes
love I
already.
love radishes in my potato salad, either raw or boiled. Now, if you boil them, they're a little bit milder. I just
Yeah,
love
and
them.
I like to roast them or bake them or put them in,
Mhm.
somebody cook them because it takes the heat right out of them, which I like a little bit of that, like in a salad or whatever, and slice up a couple and drop in a salad or something. It's really nice. But if you're eating a bunch of them, you don't want that much heat, right? So, but if you roast them, I mean, it takes that heat right out of them and it just gets a
Yeah,
really nice, a little bit sweeter of a flavor. Really good. Really
they're
good.
pretty amazing. I love them.
Turned into be one of my favorites. Like I'll throw, just cook up something, and just like you would with potatoes or anything, just throw some radish in and roast it with any kind of meat, and you get like this little nice side around your meat with
I
some.
planted some white radishes that look more
Mm,
like they look like carrots.
mm-hmm.
It's the first year. I can't remember the name of the variety, but it's the first year I've planted them and they're not going to be ready yet, but
I did a
yeah.
lot of daikon
Hmm.
last year, and I let them go to seed, and then I
I like
was
the little seeds on top.
yeah, and I did eat some of those too, just like you do with the radishes, but I also let them go to seed because I was going to save the seeds, right? Well, then I didn't get out there um and do my due diligence and gather the seeds like I would, and I kind of like just let things go, and they started spreading, and I had so many. It was daikon radish spread everywhere, popping up in my
Oh
garden,
boy.
like it was
That's a good
everywhere.
problem.
It seems like it would be, but paths, everything. I mean, it was
That's what happens with
everywhere.
my dill. If I
Yeah.
don't get to my dill
So
becomes
I
a forest. Yep.
so I had to really work on that this spring when I was prepping the garden and get all that stuff because they were popping up right and left. So I'm pulling them everywhere, and I'm still seeing some pop up occasionally. There's still seeds out there that's still popping up, and I grab them when I see them because I don't want them popping up in pathways and in beds where I have other stuff because they do take up some space. I mean, they just spread out there and they get big.
Yeah.
And they get big. They get
They get
really
pretty
big.
big. Yeah.
Those roots. I mean, that actual radish on a daikon radish is really long and really deep, and it gets big. It's really big. And in permaculture and in just gardening in general, I mean, it's a good crop for loosening soil because
Yeah.
if you just cut them off and then leave the root in there and let it rot in that soil, it makes like these pockets in your soil, and feeds your soil really
We
good.
actually planted some at the back of our property where we have a lot of clay for that specific reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, they'll spread and grow
Well,
next year all
unfortunately,
over
the
the place.
clay is so bad back there.
You don't mind?
They never grew big enough to. They died.
Really?
The clay's
Wow.
pretty bad in a couple of spots
That
back
is
there.
crazy. Yeah, because
Yeah,
daikon radish, it seems like a pretty fairly aggressive plant as far as
I
spreading its
know. I
seed
know.
and growing. So I'm kind of surprised. Wow. Well, anyway, that's what's going on around here, and I thought that was some interesting stuff. But today we're going to talk about keeping animals cool in hot weather is going to be our main topic, and maybe there's not a ton to say about this. We definitely got a list of a few things we want to talk about. But last week, I mean, right, this week is pretty mild here. It's 70s, but last week we were 90s
Wow.
early. So it could be a really hot year. So it's something to think about. And if no matter what livestock you have, or even pets, we have to consider pets too. I mean, if
Yeah.
you have, just your pets, even taking care of them in hot weather, there's some things to consider when it gets hot out. Taking care of them, especially when you're going to confine them to an area where they don't have total control on how they can get cool. You have to be the provider for that.
Yeah.
So, we're going to talk a little bit about that, but I think it's important. It's really important if you want to do proper husbandry with your animals and take care of them and just be a good steward of your livestock and pets. You have to consider how to take care of them when the weather turns hot. So it's
Yep.
something you got to think about. And I think that one of the biggest issues I see when people raise livestock, especially in a larger scale, is they take away the shade.
Oh yeah.
I've seen those pictures online where you'll see like where somebody will have one thing out in the middle of a pasture and
One
it'll be
tree in a
casting a shade, and
pasture.
you'll see every cow up in the whole
Yep.
lot that's like trying to crowd into that shaded spot. And because they've taken away all the trees
Yeah.
and there's just no trees, no
Yeah. And
shade for them.
that's such an important consideration with your animals because
Yeah.
if they're all crowding under one tree, then there's not airflow between them and they're still heating up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's why I'm a big fan of silvopasture, having
Yes.
running your animals between trees and rows of trees and things like that. And that way they could come and go in and out of the shade all hours of the day, anytime they want, and they can kind of feed off that. But just having a good amount of trees, or if you don't have trees, if you're not going to do it that way, at least have artificial shelters put up for them,
Yep.
put something up with even tarps or something
Yes. Some
that
kind of a
gives them
roof.
plenty of room for all of them to get in and out of there different times of the day and not be crowded, like you said, so they can still have the airflow.
Yeah.
Some kind of outbuildings or just roof over them.
Yeah. And I mean, you can move it if you're rotational grazing and maybe you don't have an area where you have the opportunity for trees or you're working on trees, but they're not there yet. You can, I mean, I see it with like Justin Rhodes and Joe Salatin. They have a lot of their stuff is on skids or on wheels. You can maybe make some kind of a movable shade
Yeah.
structure for them
And
to
the
have.
bigger the animal, the more difficult that's going to be. If you're doing
Yep.
cows, it's going to be a lot harder to do that. You're best to have them in a civil pasture area or just lots of shade. Natural
Yep.
shade would be a lot better. And you shared something on Facebook. We were talking about this earlier. I think it was last week, and
Yes.
it's showing like the difference in temperatures by having like tall grass and plants and trees versus bare land. Like just the air temperature around that and the ground temperature around that there's an amazing difference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the soil temperature, like if you
Hmm.
mow something like our mowed lawns, if you mow your lawn short, that temperature is a lot higher than if you have, you know, maybe like 6 inches of grass
Hmm.
and overgrowth. And then the more you go up, so if you go to like 18 inches, it's even cooler. So
Yeah. And
it
animals
just
will lay
shows.
down in that. They'll bed down in that and cool down, get on the ground, cool themselves
Yeah.
down, and
And if you
yeah, that's how they
combine
do it.
those two with a tree and taller grasses, you're
Hmm.
just giving the animals a really good chance of not getting dehydrated and sick. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that kind of stuff works good for animals you have on pasture. Now, if you're going to have them in a building, like I have rabbits and quail, and if you have chickens, things like that, you need outbuildings, obviously, and you need good ventilation. It's going to have a roof over it. Actually, they're going to be in there, but you still need that good ventilation. You need good
Yep.
airflow through there. And you don't want drafts like in the wintertime, but you want ventilation. And there's a difference, depending on how you design things. But yeah, you need outbuildings with good ventilation. If you're going to, like, I keep my rabbits in a lean-to area. It's open on both ends at the top. And we'll talk about airflow later, but when I'm not getting enough airflow there, I got fans in there that keep the air moving across them. So they get
Hmm.
plenty of air across them, which, like I said, we'll talk
Yeah,
about
and
airflow
I
a
mean
little bit more.
animals if you have a bigger piece of property, so acreage or whatever, unlike what we both have currently, and you're not in control of it, the animals will pick where is suitable for them. But when
Yeah.
you can find the animals, we have to be we have to think those things through.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And one of the things you might want to do is, I mean, we might assume that it's cool enough because we don't just sit out there and bake in it. We're only out there and we quickly check on them. We might want to put, some temperature and humidity gauges out there just so you can check on it and see where it's at.
And just watching your animals, you can tell
Yep.
when an animal's really laboring in the heat. Like I've seen my rabbits when they're really hot, and you can just tell they're breathing heavy. They just look like they're laboring just laying there. I mean, they just look like they're under a lot of stress, and you can see that in animals when they're under a lot of heat stress, and you got to do
Yeah.
something. And we'll be talking more about that here in a few minutes. But
Yeah.
yeah, definitely, that's something you want to pay attention to your animals. You want to watch them, and just part of taking care of animals is observation. It really is just seeing
Right.
what their needs are and meeting those needs. And they'll
And
let you know in a lot of cases.
most animals are going to do better in cold than they are in heat. Now,
Yeah.
obviously not an amphibian, but
Right.
most animals will do better in cold than they will heat. Like
Yep.
cows, even rabbits, they do
Oh
better in
yeah.
the cold than they
Oh
do
yeah.
in
They
the
don't even
heat.
notice. They're happy as
Yeah.
they can be in
So
the cold weather. Yeah.
the heat is actually more dangerous to them. And that's
Yeah.
why it's so important that people consider that.
But most people think about the
The cold.
cold. They're always
Yeah.
concerned about heating their animals, and they don't think much about cooling their animals. But it is something. I mean, if you've ever, I mean, I've never lost one due to heat, but I've definitely seen them under stress due to heat.
We
And
lost we lost a chicken due to heat.
yeah, it can happen real easy if you don't
Yep.
stay on top of it. You and me, we're like in fairly mild areas. We get these peaks in summer where it
Hmm.
gets really hot, but it's not like we're going through months of that normally.
Right.
We might have days of that, here and
But
there.
that said, because of that, our animals are
We
not
don't think of it as
acclimated at
much.
all.
Yeah, and we don't think about it as much because it's
Right.
not something we're not always dealing with. You're trying to raise some livestock in Arizona or something. You're going to be
You think
thinking of
about
that a lot
yes.
more than what
Yeah,
we tend to think about it. Yeah,
for sure.
exactly. Um, the most important thing, other than shade, I mean, obviously, right up there with shade is water access.
Oh
Your
yeah.
animals have to have access to good water, good clean water, whenever they feel like they need it.
Yep.
They're going to monitor that. They're going to go to it when they need it, but don't let their water run out.
Yep. Lots of it. Keep it as cool
Yep.
as you can.
Yep. I
Yep.
mean, yeah, put it in a shady spot if you can, and that
And
way they.
clean. I mean, during the heat, if that water builds up, if that water gets hot and it gets bacteria in it, bacteria just breeds in that.
And moving water is really nice for that. If there is some kind of a setup where you can do some kind of a moving water system, which there's a lot of like where it overflows and comes out and flows in, or if you can just make it run several times a day and kind of flush out and cool it and do that, those are really good setups. And there are a lot of setups like that. I've seen stuff like that for pigs and cows both, where they just kind of moves the water through occasionally, cleans it, cools it, and keeps it full. So that's a good system if you can find a system like that. But yeah, it's very important. I mean, in the heat, I'm out there swapping out water bottles twice a day in the summertime for rabbits, making sure they got plenty cool water. Like I said, once it starts getting like it's 100-degree water, they're not going to want to drink it, you know? So I try to keep it somewhat cool.
Yeah, it's not cooling. Nobody wants to drink 100. I don't want to drink 100.
I don't either, but I mean, you got to think if it's been out there for 6 hours in 100-degree weather, that water's pretty stinking warm, you know? So they're not going to want to drink. That's not really going to relieve them. Yeah, it's not going to relieve them much if it's that hot. So you got to change it out, you know? We talked about it a little bit, but airflow, keeping the airflow. If you've got them inside, outside, whatever, make sure they got an airflow, a place where there's lots of air moving across them, because it makes a big difference. I mean, you consider your own self, and when you can tell, like, there's days when it's 80 degrees outside and you open your windows and there's no airflow. It feels like it's 100 in your house.
Yep.
Okay. I've had days when it's 90 out, but there's such a strong, nice airflow, and you open your windows and the house feels cooler, right? Because you got this airflow, and it keeps things feeling better. And they will feel more refreshed if they have a good airflow. So even if you have them inside of a building, they need that airflow across them. It's why I have fans mounted up. You know, I do have good ventilation in my rooms, but when the wind ain't blowing, when there's no movement of air, you got to make some air. You got to make some airflow.
It's amazing how much cooler you feel if there's a little bit of a breeze.
Yeah. Now I use box fans. You were telling me you guys have a little bit different setup.
We have, so when we're camping a lot right now, because out at the property we camp and we get really hot. Our dogs get really hot. We don't have chickens or anything out there yet, but we have a Ryobi battery operated fan, and they make misting fans for that too. They're absolutely amazing. That thing runs it has pretty good power. It can put out a pretty good amount of wind, but that thing will run on the battery at least 8 hours.
Yeah.
And so we use that a lot because sometimes people think this far north that we do not get heat. We actually get pretty good swings in heat. So we get snow and cold, but we do get into the 90s. And there's sometimes when we've been out there and it's well into the 90s, and then at night it doesn't cool off, or it's super humid and it's like 80 degrees and it's humid. It gets pretty stifling to try to sleep in that. So we've been using that battery powered fan, and it's pretty amazing. And I mean, if you don't have power where your rabbits are or your chickens are, you definitely could use something like that.
Yeah. And I've been on Amazon just browsing around what was out there, and there looks like there's some decent setups with solar panels already attached to them too. That you can get them. And you know what? People say, well, solar panel doesn't work when the sun's out. Well, that's when you're going to need that fan, is when the sun's out and it's hot.
For the most part,
so, I mean, a solar panel for that kind of a situation would probably be ideal for a fan situation to cool off your animals. So yeah, I think there's some really good tools like that out there. Maybe I can look that back up and try to drop a link in the show notes so you can take a look at that and understand what I'm talking about. Now beyond that, the hottest of days, when I'm thinking about like my rabbits, I'll just talk about rabbits here for a minute and talk about how I keep them cool, because they are an animal that does not do well in the heat, especially now. If you're going to raise them in colonies on the ground where they can tunnel in the ground, live like they would, that's great. I did that when I first started raising rabbits, and I quit for a variety of reasons, good reasons. But if you are a person that still does that, I mean, you don't have to worry about that. They will dig little tunnels. They will get down in the ground, and they will stay cool. And it's not even something you got to worry about. If you're putting them in cages, hanging them, now they're going to need something to cool them off. So on the hottest of days, when it's like upper 90s, I'll freeze like 2-liter bottles. I'll get like 2-liter bottles of water and freeze them. And I'll lay a 2-liter bottle in each cage, just frozen water, and it'll last for a few hours, and you'll see when they get really hot, they'll just lay their entire body right up against that 2-liter bottle to stay cool. And I'll keep a few and I'll just swap them out. Half a day, I'll leave them out for 5-6 hours, swap them out, give them some new ones, and they'll kind of get them through the whole day that way. And I've had to do that on the hottest of days. You get 100-degree especially if you have like some pregnant rabbits or something, and you want to really reduce
Yeah.
the stress for them, they're going to need something like that to really take the stress off of them. You can actually use ceramic tiles.
I've
Ceramic
heard
is
of
kind of
people doing that.
amazing. You can like lay some ceramic tiles in their cage, and they will lay on them, and they stay cooler. There's some science behind that. You can look it up, but they will actually stay cooler than the air around them,
That
and
makes
they will lay
sense.
right on them ceramic tiles, and it'll help them stay cool. Um, like you said, with a misting system for those fans, you can do that. Now, if you're out something on pasture, you can actually set up sprinkler systems for
Yeah.
animals to keep
Yeah.
them cool. I mean, and it will work. I mean, it will help them cool off. You'll see animals like walk through them just to try to cool off or stand
Oh,
in
it
them.
works really well. They
Yeah.
use that. So my one of my kids is a musician and does a lot of live music gigs for, I mean, big, huge stages. And they actually, for workers behind the stage, often they run misting
Hmm.
systems. It can be 100 degrees, but it feels way cooler when you're on a misting
Oh yeah, I
system.
remember. I remember when my girls were real little. Me and my wife, and my girls all went to an air show at Wilbur Wright Air Force Base over in Ohio, and it was it was over 100 degrees outside. It
Yeah.
was a smoking hot day, and they had these little misting stations set up everywhere you could just walk through, and we couldn't stay out of those things. You know, the girls would just constantly going through to where they was almost soaking
Yeah.
wet from them just to try to cool off. But they work. They will cool you
They do
down.
work. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be anything complicated. You got the missing system, sprinkler systems, even like I said, for
Yep.
larger livestock will work. And it'll help them to stay cool. But different animals have different ways of keeping cool. I mean, for example, like pigs, they need mud to waller in, and they'll get that
Yep.
mud all over their bodies, and that actually helps them stay cool, and it keeps their skin from getting, sunburned, and it actually cools them down. A lot of animals, will use, just natural things like that to try to stay cool. We think of things like sheep and alpacas. They need to actually be sheared in the hottest of
Right.
weather so they can stay cool. But you made the point that some animals actually their coat helps them stay cool.
Yeah, livestock guardian
Yeah.
dogs. I have double coated dogs, and
Hmm.
you're actually advised not to cut them.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to cut them because they feel like it would cool them to get rid of that hair.
Hmm.
But you're actually advised to not cut that hair. It actually
It
is their cooling
just
system.
depends on the kind of animal you
Yeah.
have. Where
Yeah.
sheep is more
So
of an animal
it's
that's for cold weather. It's more designed to keep them warm. It's
right.
nice to get it off of them when it's hot.
Yeah.
So
So it's, whatever animal you have, it's your job to research and see what is best for them. Because the other thing that we do for our dogs, because we have two Bernese mountain dogs slash Australian Shepherds,
hmm.
and we do the same thing with the 2 liter bottles, but our dogs actually have backpacks that they carry. They're not backpacks. They go on their backs, but
Yeah.
I don't know, they're packs. We actually will freeze water bottles and put them in the pockets on the sides.
Nice.
And
Yeah, that's smart. Yeah.
that cools them off. But they have their own, they also have pools and stuff to cool off. But
Hmm.
um that's what I know, a lot of people that do that with their guardian dogs too, is they do the same thing. They have a pool or they have a misting system, because
Yeah.
those livestock guardian dogs are going to be out there. I don't have actually livestock guardian dogs, because real livestock guardian dogs live with their animals.
Right.
So they'll be out there with the animals, seeking out that shade, seeking out that water, just like your sheep will, or your cows will, or
Yeah.
your chickens will.
Hmm. And if you got things like chickens, they're smart. They'll do it. They'll get their little dust
Yeah.
baths and they'll go inside when they're hot. They'll get under I'll see if you got a raised coop or anything, they'll get under it and hit the shade. I mean, I've watched it all my life. They'll find that shade and find those cooler areas. And as long as they got some room to do that, if
Right.
like I said, you
Well,
confine them
that's
to an
something,
area and they can't do it, it's a different story.
yeah, and that's something you might want to consider when you're designing a coop
Hmm.
or your rabbitry or whatever, is
You
you
can
got
do
to
double
design it
duty.
for winter, for
Yeah.
summer,
Yeah.
you know.
Like I said, you can put a coop right on the ground, or you could raise it and give them an area they can get under and get shade. I mean, it actually could serve like a it's
Right.
function stacking in a sense, even on design of something like a coop. It can be
Yeah.
a shade area or a building for them. But ducks, they're going to need good cool water because they cool themselves
Yes.
by swimming. They have to get their feet wet, and it actually circulates that coolness through their body when they're in water, and moving their legs through water helps them. They get their cooling through their legs. Geese, same way. I mean, every animal has different ways of cooling themselves off. You want to research that, know what animals you have, and know how they do it. And, and then if either set up an area naturally for them to be able to do that, or provide what they need to be able to do that.
Yep.
So yeah, it's something you have to consider. Breeds are so important because every
Mm-hmm.
animal, there's just breeds that do better in certain temperatures. I mean,
Right.
they're, it's just the way we've, selective breeding for a certain area.
Yes.
There's things
Yeah.
that are like, there are rabbits that handle heat a lot better, like your Florida breed, your Californians. There's things like, there's things or breeds that do really good in hot weather versus other breeds. Um,
Right.
and I think that there's,
Well, yeah, like you're probably not going to want black Angus if you live in Arizona because the black
yeah,
on those cow hides, they're going to heat up. But you
gonna help
probably
you.
also don't want a Scottish Highlander in Arizona.
Yep.
But where I live, a Scottish Highlander is great because while we
Mhm.
have a couple of warm days, cows need to be, we have pretty rough winters. So the Scottish Highlander does great in the winter here. So
Mhm.
just thinking about those breeds. I mean, and the same thing with chickens and rabbits, like you said. I mean, some chickens will have smaller combs because, and those are better for the north because they don't get frostbite on their combs
Mhm.
and they'll have feathered feet. But you may not want that if you're in Arizona. You might want
Right.
a bird that has less feathers.
And maybe even a smaller breed that doesn't have as much fat or have as much body weight that they're going to have to put a lot more energy into moving around and
Yeah.
and things like that, because that brings us really to the next thing we have on the list, which is reducing activity. If they're having to do it, if they're a large animal and they're having to do a lot of grazing or a lot of moving around to feed themselves, it's a lot more energy. It's a lot, how do you feel like doing things when it's 100 degrees outside? Nobody wants to run a marathon in 100-degree weather, right? Well, yeah, I mean, you want to reduce that activity, and if they're on a large pasture, maybe that is a time you want to bring some hay in for them and have them in a shaded area where they can eat right there in some shade, rather than getting out on open pasture and having to graze grass. It's in full sun all day long. It's things like that to consider if you're in a time when it's really hot out, and you want to make it as easy on your animals as you can. And listen, and here's another thing: the larger the livestock, the more now this sounds maybe bad, like every animal life has value. I'm not denying that. But financially, you really don't want to lose a cow
Right.
or a large hog or something like that. You've got a large amount of money invested in, or that's going to feed your family, or even have it for sale or whatever at some point. You definitely want to be thinking about those things the bigger the investment. I mean, you want to think about it no matter what, but I can tell you that losing a rabbit will not impact my bank account like losing a cow would.
Right. Exactly. I mean, you're
So,
talking several thousand
yeah,
dollars
you want to take
probably.
care of that investment, and part of that is just taking care of them, and them not be stressed out. And and it may not kill them, but it's going to weaken them, and it's going to cause weight loss, and it's going to
Right.
affect them in different ways. So I mean, you just want to make it as stress-free as environment and take care of those animals the best you can, and these are just some of those things you can do that. And you already talked about how if you've got them on nice pasture with tall grass and lots of trees and lots of shrubs, it's just cooler. It's really helpful. It's just going to be a better environment for those animals on pasture. And setting up your coops and things with plenty of ventilation, fans, whatnot, in an area maybe it's already being cast shade from another building or something would be great, or trees. Because you know what? You put trees beside a house on the south side of a house, it's going to keep a house cooler. If you're going to build an outbuilding, but you got some trees, say you got rabbits in a building, or chickens in a coop or whatever, but you got trees to the south of that blocking the sun for most of the day, keeping that building cooler. These things will make a huge difference on the inside temperature of that building. So
Yeah,
think
and
about
that's
things
that's
like
like a
that.
permaculture design thing
Yeah.
too. So in the summer, you have a deciduous tree with leaves on it on the south side shading, and then in the winter, those leaves have fallen off, and you want the sun on the coop. So it's actually just, thinking really well through your
Hmm.
design. And just because you've already done something doesn't mean you can't either add to it or move it. I can't even tell you how many times I've moved things. Like right now, where the coop is at, where our chicken coop is at, where we lost a chicken due to heat, was actually a really bad spot to put it.
Yeah.
You
I,
only learn these things by doing them. So, it's
Yeah,
just
and
the way it
if you've
is.
got something out there and it's out in the middle of the sun right now, but you have some room, maybe you could put a couple fast growing trees like a hybrid poplar or a mulberry or something like that that can also provide food for those animals, plus
Hmm.
cast shade on the building. You can add that. In a couple of years, you're gonna have a nice shade being cast over that building, over the lot area around where they're living, and plan that out and make that part of the design and change it up a little bit. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
So,
absolutely perfect. Yeah. And I love that's the one thing I actually love doing is thinking about permaculture design and where things should
mhm.
go and just what works
Yeah.
and what won't work. It feels a little overwhelming at first. Um,
And the good
but
news is,
yeah.
unless you're doing infrastructure, it's pretty easy to change. Trees can be timely to change, sometimes
Mhm.
expensive, but it can take a lot longer if you have to take a tree down and move a tree or regrow a tree somewhere
Right.
else. That can be big, but all that stuff other than
But a
infrastructure,
chicken coop you can move
yeah, yeah,
usually.
things like
Um,
driveways and infrastructure, like housing and buildings and stuff, is something you definitely want to put more thought into. But there's definitely things you can adjust even later if you make mistakes. I've made plenty. I've moved trees and cut down trees and replanted trees in other places, and moved shrubs and plants and garden beds, and right now I have two apple trees that are cast, which weren't near as big as they are now. Well, at one point I had a garden in my backyard. Now I've since put gardens up in the front, side yards, and everywhere, and I moved kind of everything up there. Well, I reintroduced the garden to the backyard. I added all those beds back, but I quit for a few years because grandkids. I wanted swing sets and
oh yes, I
trampolines and
remember.
all the things back there. So I kind of took out that area and I made it more for a place for the kids. Well, as the kids have gotten older, the less they've had anything to do with that. So back to garden it went. Well, what I didn't realize was I have two apple trees kind of to the southwest there a little bit that are casting a hard afternoon shade on those garden beds now. And it's like been good to some extent because it's been working good for the broccoli and the cauliflower and the cabbage that I have growing
And the
there,
lettuces, right.
but not so good for some of the stuff I've grown there. So it's been, I got cucumbers and beans and beets and even got some corn on the far side of it. It's not so great for that. It's actually casting a little too much shade for that.
Right.
So I'm actually going to have to maybe cut down those trees a little bit, lower them a little bit next year because I'm thinking those just keep getting taller and taller and taller. And I've kind of let them go. I haven't really been pruning them down,
Right.
keeping them short. I'm gonna have to start thinking about that if I'm keeping garden back there because it's starting to cast shade now. This would be, I mean, this has kind of been reverse of livestock, but it's just things you got to think about on the design of your property as far as where is shade landing and what kind of issues is it going to cause or what kind of things is it going to help
Right.
you with. These are things you have to consider.
Yeah, and it will just totally depend on the area you're in. I mean, where I'm at, it makes sense to have trees that shed their leaves in the winter because in the winter I need the heat and in the summer I need the shade. But if you're
Mhm.
in somewhere like Arizona and the shade is always kind of nice, then you might want to plant something like evergreen
Yeah,
or something like
it
that
will
that
grow.
never sheds any
Yeah,
of its leaves. Yeah. So,
yeah.
yep.
Yeah. I mean, you have to consider your animal. You have to consider your location, your your climate, what you have in that area. And then design it accordingly. I mean, there's just so much to consider that we couldn't possibly go over everything that you'd have to consider, but we've given you a few things that you definitely, some ideas, some things to consider, some things you definitely want to do, and then just kind of evaluate it for your situation and make it happen. Um, you can probably raise just about anything anywhere. It's just how
Hmm.
much work do you want to put into it?
Right.
There are definitely things that are more suited to certain climates that will make your job a lot easier. And there are
Yeah.
things that are going to be, you're going to have to put a lot of work into to keep them animals under less stress in the hot weather. So, you rabbits can be a task in the summertime. Um, but other animals can be a task in the wintertime. I mean, it's just, you just got to kind of evaluate it for your area and figure out what's best for you. But you can pretty much make anything just about anywhere survive, but just how convenient is it going to be? That's the thing. How much work you want to
Yeah,
put
that's
into
how
it.
much work are you going to be doing? Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I think unless you have something else to add on that, we can get into our recommendations. Can you think of any other maybe inputs for that?
I cannot think of anything.
Okay. Well, what do you have that you want to recommend today?
Well, I wanted to recommend the Ryobi either misting fan, and then they also have just a straight up fan. So the misting fan, it's battery powered and it can go over a 5 gallon bucket.
Okay.
So you can put it on you or animals. You could probably put it over a barrel if you designed it right. But we also have the one that just is a straight up fan and it works great. If you don't have power, you would just have to charge up the batteries. So I
Hmm.
have that. And the other thing I have is Polyface Designs, which is a Joel Salatin ish book. I don't know if he did all the designing or if I think other people did the designs, but Polyface is selling it. It's a big book and it has a bunch of different, what do you call them? Patterns, not patterns. Patterns is when you do clothing, but patterns on how to build things.
Plans, just plans.
Plans. There we go. That's the word, plans. So it has a bunch of different plans in there on how to build things. And a couple of those are structures that are movable, like a chick saw that have shade built into them. So you might want to look into that book. But Justin Rhodes is doing something similar called Homestead Builds. And I don't think it's out till December. And his is for smaller homesteads. So we all know Joel has a ton of acreage and a lot of animals. So it would be more for like your farm or your large farm where you're putting a couple of hundred chickens into this building, where Justin's book is going to be geared toward just the smaller homestead. And I'm not sure if the PDF is actually already out and if it's the print that they're waiting for printing, but
I seen something about that a while back. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fully funded. It will be out, but they both have those two out. I actually own Polyface Designs and plan on using it for a few things. I'm probably going to buy Homestead Builds, but both of those help you build mobile structures that you could use to help create some shade for your animals and just mobile structures for anything.
Sure.
Really.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those are mine.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure I get a link in for that solar panel fan that I seen. I thought would be would be a really nice fan to add if you didn't have power in an outbuilding, you wanted a solar panel out there, or just maybe wanted to save electricity. Maybe you don't want to use your electricity out there. You could have a solar powered fan. Also, you were mentioning about the misting fan. It made me think about, have you seen these builds where people take a cooler and they put the PVC, like the 4-inch PVC pipe come out and turns out, and they put ice in the cooler and you can install a fan and it blows it through the
I have seen those.
And it makes a nice little, it's basically
like a DIY.
It's almost like a DIY air conditioner. And I thought, boy, if you got in a situation where you have an enclosed area, but it was, hot and you couldn't, that would be a neat thing to put, dump a couple bags of ice in and just let it just blow cooler air in an area. I thought that just came to me while you were mentioning that. And I thought that would work pretty well for something like that too, in an enclosed area for some small livestock, if you had some smaller livestock. I also included the book, Silvopasture. It's a guide to managing grazing animals, forage crops, and trees in a temperate farm ecosystem by Steve Gabriel. It is a great book. I actually won that book on a contest through who was the publisher?
Chelsea Green.
Chelsea Green. They were doing a contest. It was one of a few books I actually won in a contest, and it's a great book. It's fantastic.
It is good. I've read it twice and checked it out from the library, and I need to buy my own copy because I've read it twice already from the library.
Very good book to have. And it'll make you consider things like having a silvopasture, having that shade out there for them, and having that taller grass and the things that cool off that property, and just make it a lot better area to especially when you have your grazing animals, your sheep, cows, goats, just even pigs. I mean, pigs, you can run silvopasture for pigs, and it's a lot better environment for them.
And you can do that on a small piece. You do not need hundreds of acres to do that. You can do that on an acre.
You have an acre or two, you can build a silvopasture. I mean, I do a very small silvopasture with rabbit tractors and quail tractors through my little, quarter acre here, just running them around the yard between trees and bushes and things like that. So it doesn't have to be large scale. Don't have to think like that. Silvopasture works on both ways. So, that's something to consider. So that's the book I had mentioned, but that's what I have. And I think all those things could be really, really helpful for taking, animal husbandry, animal care to the next level.
Yeah. As we're headed into summer and heat, I mean, I don't know about you, but up here, it's actually already been unseasonably warm. We're a few weeks ahead of time.
Last week, we were in the 90s here last week, which is very rare for this early in the year. And people more south of us are really getting some heat waves. And so it's something that they've probably already been considering and probably been dealing with already. But if you're new to animals, it's something you definitely got to be thinking about and setting up for and be ready for it. When you see it, it's a day or two out, start getting things ready and be prepared for it and take care of those animals. Because you know what? We've been given a huge responsibility. It's not a big deal if you lose a tomato plant. When you start having animals suffer and die, it's kind of a big deal, and you don't need to be letting that happen. And they've been placed in your care and you need to care for them properly. And part of that is
Yep.
making sure that they have what they need when the temperature isn't ideal for them. So definitely
Yeah.
be paying
We
attention to that.
definitely need to be prepared and plan ahead for them. It's really
Yes.
important. I mean, we plan ahead for ourselves. We need to plan
Yeah.
ahead for the animals.
Yeah. They can't go inside and turn on the air conditioner
Right.
when it's really hot. And that being said, I remember when I got these rabbits last year and I had some that were pregnant. I
You
have an
did
air
bring them
conditioned
inside.
office out here in my barn, and I actually brought them in here and kicked the air because it was 100 degrees outside. We were having a heat wave of 100 degrees, and I actually set some cages in my office on a
Yeah.
cement floor. I brought them in and I put the air on them because I didn't have a proper setup out there for them at the time. Um, because I just got back to raising some. I took a couple of years off from rabbits, and I got them, and immediately within a couple of weeks it went to 100 degrees. I was like, "Whoa, I'm not ready for this." So I brought them in here. I flipped the air on, and I
Yeah,
had them in
there's nothing wrong with
you
that. In
know, and
fact,
some people would
when
say, "Well, that's spoiling an animal," but they were pregnant and it was hot, and
you
I
do
didn't
what you
have
got to
the,
do.
I wasn't set up for it yet, so I did what I had to do to kind of keep them stress free, and it worked, and
Yeah,
it,
I
it
don't know if I know a farmer that has not brought an animal into some portion of their house or garage
yeah,
because it needed to. I mean, we
yeah.
actually kind of planned it when we were building our house. I said, I need a bathroom and a mudroom at the back in case we need to bring an animal in. You
I've
just
seen
don't
people do
know.
it in extreme cold too. Bring some
Yeah.
animals in and try to keep them warm when they didn't have a setup for them, was keeping them warm enough. I've seen people do that. I mean, you do what you got to do when you're a homesteader slash farmer. That's a big part of your life right there, and you got to take care of I'm not saying you should. It's better to have a setup for them
Right.
outside,
Yes. Oh, for
but in an
sure.
emergency, I mean, when you got
But
to do what you got
sometimes
to do, you get
extenuating
an injured animal
circumstances
or a sick
happen.
animal or whatever, and they need that little extra care. Sometimes you got to do it, to
Yep.
reduce the stress. So it's something to think about. Anyway, I think that's all we have. How about you, Rachel? Anything extra you want to throw in there?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, folks, until next time, happy homesteading. God bless.
And grow where you're planted.